Welcome everyone to this week in Svelte. This is our second appointment of the year, and I'm Paulo. I will be your host for today, and I hope you will join us in forces. So let's start with our usual agenda. So we will go over the changelog, we will go over some quick fact and announcement. Actually, there will be none. There will be a community showcase, and maybe it's a cheating one because I will showcase a small library that I was writing lately. There will be a question and answer. So I will showcase something that I was experimenting with. So keep being tuned in if you want to figure out. And let's start. And before we start with the changelog, I want to publicly thank Antoine at Probably Coding on Twitter, because he tagged us and he said, okay, hey, I saw that you are constantly using the changelog, you are navigating around the GitHub API, not the GitHub API, the GitHub page, basically. And so he made this very cool app, which is svelte changelog.vercel.app, to help us. So yeah, it's pretty cool, right? It's good looking, has svelte colors, most importantly, and has a lot of nice features, because like you can hide the beta releases. So if we don't want to talk about Svelte 5, maybe because there is some secret, and it's not like this, but we will talk about Svelte 5 today. You can swap between Svelte and SvelteKit, and also, most importantly, like this is basically it's an accordion, and the nice fact is that by default only the last week is open, so we can basically like very quickly go over the last week changelog, but if we want, we can go and take a look at some old one. It's cool, very cool, and I want to publicly thank you. And so this made our job very much more easy. So let's start with the changelog for Svelte. We can go back and let's see. There are a bunch of fixes for Svelte 5. Again, obviously, it's in development. It's in active development. So again, they are fixing all the bugs that we, as a user, are reporting to them. So there are some bugs about nested effect, heuristic, transitions. Transition, I think, is something that they are really worked on lately to like fix transition and animation that we all love. Event delegation, transform text area and content editable, and so reuse state only deeply applies to plain object. Very cool. Skip certain slot validation. These are all fixes. There are also some Svelte 4 release, because again, they are actively working on Svelte 5 and we can't wait for it to release. But currently we are using Svelte 4, so they are taking care of that too. So they added types for popover attributes and events. And I don't know if you know about this, but the popover API is a new browser API, which is very, very cool. I want to show you, because popover API on MVN. This basically allows you to have a popover with the browser, and I probably should zoom in a bit. So you can specify a popover target. So this button, basically you are saying that this button can open the popover, my popover, and then you can specify the ID of my popover. And if you have a popover, it's very cool sounding popover. If you specify the popover attribute, basically this div will become a popover. And the very fun part is that this all works without JavaScript. So when you click on this button, this will be shown. I don't know if they show some example. I think they are not, which is a bummer. Maybe using, let's say, because I want to show you, there is light dismiss. So this is basically the same kind of um, uh, thing that like um, the browsers are moving towards, giving us the ability to like toggle popover dialogues and stuff like that without using JavaScript, which I think is very, very cool. For dialogues, we are not there yet because like this seems like it could be used with dialogue, but for accessibility, you cannot use a popover for a dialogue because dialogue has to trap focus. The popover does not do that, so it shows the popover always on top of the document, but it does not inert the rest of the document, so you can still focus on other part of the document. A very, very cool API. Keep an eye on it, and I think it's also. I don't know if they have. I don't think they have. Let's see the can I use popover API, because I think it's starting to be quite supported. Yeah, I mean, it has a 77.99. It's not supported in Firefox. Shame Firefox. But it's supported in the newest Firefox. So you can start experimenting with this if you don't have to have a 100% coverage. It's very cool. But let's go back to Svelte, because that's what we love. The gamepad connected and gamepad disconnected events. This is also very cool because I don't know if you know it, but you can actually listen for when a gamepad is connected to your computer via the browser API. And obviously now you can also do it in Svelte, because probably before they were not tracking those events. Make types ES3 a dependency. This is just a TypeScript stuff. Like they are using ES3, which is a parser, an AST parser inside, and it was probably causing some problem. I think I saw this issue, and it was causing some problem with a specific tsconfig configuration. Annoying stuff. And bump axe object query. I mean, this is it's more a chore than a fix. Let's move to SvelteKit, which also has some interesting stuff. Log a warning if fallback page overwrite pre-rendered page. It's some week that we are seeing these kind of fixes. And also, I mean, I started here, but that's just because that's another very cool feature about Antoine. Like you can show or dim or hide non-SvelteKit release. So we were having a bit of adapters release, updating the peer dependency for SvelteKit, support to read from $up/server. We will talk about this later. But we have another fix. Don't stash away original history methods so other libs can monkey patch it. Monkey patch is something that like it was very used in the past. Basically, the monkey patch is like there is a global function, in this case probably push history and stuff like that. And some libraries were basically changing the global one to add features to that. Is not a very much recommended feature, because you are literally like, if other libraries relies on the fact that like push history is literally the same, it can be problematic. But there are a lot of libraries that don't care about that and monkey patch global functions, and so it's good that SvelteKit it's kind of forced to help those library, but at the end of the day, it's good that SvelteKit does not stash away the original history methods, so that if some other library is monkey patching it, it will still work with push state and like the newest release, like the shallow routing, basically. Again, there were a bunch of adapters fixes, and log a warning if fallback page overwrites pre-rendered page. It's a good fix, and this is a feature, so it's always interesting. Now you can access $up/server, which is a new virtual module, just like $up/stores, for example, with read function. So this is a new function that is exported from this method to reading asset from the file system. Now, I want to specify, I took a look at this issue, and I've yet to understand if it's actually something that is just for adapters, or it also can be used inside SvelteKit, because most of the stuff is talking about adapters. So this is basically an utility function to allow, for example, node adapters and stuff like that to read a file from the file system and have back a response, basically. So this, I think, can be used inside load function, for example. So if you want to return a file, you can use this read function. Again, I don't know if this is to be used by as users of SvelteKit or by adapters, basically. I will check out on this, and I will update you this week in Svelte. So, and I think that's it for the changelog. So we can close these, and we can close these, and now we can move to these, which is, again, as I've said, I know, maybe it's something controversial. Don't hate me for this, but this is our community showcase. I want to showcase you something, and in this case, I'm showcasing you this Svelte client component. This is a small library that I wrote, and it's not actually a library, it's a preprocessor for Svelte. Now, we talked a bit about preprocessors in the past, and basically preprocessors allow you to take Svelte components and modify them before SvelteKit Svelte will actually compile them. And you can specify in SvelteKit, you can specify a list of preprocessor in the SvelteKit config. I will show you in Svelte Lab. So if you go to the Svelte config, you have kit adapter, and you should also have a list of, you can also specify a preprocessor. So you can do preprocess, and then you can specify an array of preprocessor and type. Yep. In this case, it's an empty array, but the usual preprocessor is import vit preprocess from svelte.js / I can't remember the import. I think it's speed preprocess. Maybe not. I don't know. I don't remember the import. But again, this is basically the preprocessor that helps you have TypeScript and some style utility. And you can very much write your own preprocessor. It's very simple. It's just an object that you can specify some, I will show you group, preprocessor group, preprocessor group. Here it is. So that's what you need to return for a preprocessor is the name of the preprocessor, which just need to be unique. And then you can have a markup, a style, and a script. And this basically, the markup gets passed the markup, the style gets passed the style, and the script gets passed the script. And basically, you can, you have the string of the Svelte component, and you can modify however you want, and you return that string, and basically you are modifying how that component behave, basically. And this is a very, I think it's a very cool and interesting feature. Personally, I wrote a preprocessor, but I'm not a huge fan of preprocessors because preprocessors allow you to have a syntax that is not standard Svelte, and the fact that you are using a preprocessor is kind of hidden behind a config file. So if someone new comes to your Svelte repo and you're using a preprocessor and it doesn't know about your preprocessor, he may see some, I don't know, some strange syntax and look at it and say what it is. Uh, but I think some preprocessor are very fun to use. Like we all use the TypeScript preprocessor. There is the preprocessor for Melt UI, which allows you to have a much more concise syntax for Melt UI. And this is another preprocessor that I wrote. I had this idea looking at Vue, because Nuxt has a concept like this. And this basically allows you to annotate a component as a client component by using the extension .client.svelte. So this means that basically if you are creating a new component, like, I don't know, my fancy button .client.svelte, that button will just be loaded on the client. So this means that during server-side rendering, it will not be loaded. When JavaScript kicks in, it will load on the client. Why do you want to do this? I don't know. I mean, I know. And the reason is because there are some libraries that are, for example, accessing and using browser API, like for example, local storage or stuff like that, inside their modules. This means just by importing this library inside your component, that component cannot be executed on the client, on the server, sorry. Otherwise, you will get an error because you are trying to access a window on the server. That doesn't make sense. It's a very niche preprocessor. I admit it. But the nice thing about this is that, like, just by annotating that client with an extensions, you can be sure that that client will not be rendered on the server. So you can be pretty like chill about using that component without having to dynamically import it yourself, without having to drop it around an if browser, stuff like that. So just to showcase how it works, you can just import Svelte client components from Svelte client components, which is this library. You add it to your list of preprocess. And then basically you just annotate your button.client.svelte as a component. And how it works under the hood, like how it transforms your code, it's very simple. You can import test from test client component, and this basically gets transformed to a dynamic import. So instead of having import test client.svelte, this gets transformed to const test. It's equal to import test client.svelte. And then whenever you use your component somewhere, it gets basically wrapped by this await test, then default test, and then it's using your component. And this basically ensures that Svelte, when it's on the server, if this promise is already resolved, it's smart enough to actually execute it, like if it's not really a promise. But in this case, it's actually a promise because it's importing this file. And so this Svelte will basically just skip this await on the server. And when it goes on the client, it will resolve this promise and render your component. There are some gotcha. So the preprocessor use static analysis to do this job. And for example, you cannot import anything else from the component file. Okay. Now I understood. I wrote this, but I was kind of what I wrote. Basically, like you cannot do import test from test client.svelte, comma, I don't know, my variable, because sometimes in Svelte you can actually do this. I'll show you svelte.dev/repo. So what you can do is you can have a script. Let's do it in a new component. component. Button, right? I can have a script tag, and this is the normal script tag, right? Okay, I can do export, let title, I don't know, and then I can create this button here. So this is a normal component. But what you can do is you can do script context equal module. And this basically allows you to export other stuff rather than just the component from this component. So I can do, for example, export let, I don't know, my variable. And this is an object that has, I don't know, test true, right? And you can import this variable with these, basically. So inside my app.svelte, I can do import button from /button.svelte. So here I am importing my button, and I can do button title is equal a. This is the normal stuff, but now I can also do this. Do this and do my variable. And as you can see, Svelte is not complaining. And the reason why it's not complaining is because this is actually a valid export from button.svelte. And we can also see, like, if I do json.stringify my variable is exactly what I was exporting there. So, I mean, again, this is, I don't know if it's something that it's very common, but with my preprocessor, you cannot do it. Only from the client component, obviously. Like in your normal components, you can do whatever you want. But if you want to use that as a client component, you cannot do this. So this is a small gotcha. You can use with Svelte component. So if you do svelte.component this test, this will still work with my preprocessor, but you cannot use, like, if you pass this test around in another component and then render it with component, if you pass it as a prop, again, this is a static analysis tool. So if you pass it around, is more of a runtime stuff. So this preprocessor cannot handle this. And this is also another case that you can handle. Like if you import test and then you reassign test to a const and then render the const, it will work the same. So it's a very small preprocessor. It's a very small library, nothing too crazy. But if you want to take a look, feel free and let me know. Open some issue if you have some issue. You will find for sure. I think it's a nice it is to have. Sometimes in a very large code base, maybe you don't want to have a bunch of if browser around. This can be a nice thing. Let me know if you agree. So this was our community showcase. Now let's move to question and answer. Now I wrote a tweet some times ago. I don't know if I can find it, maybe. Let me see. Twitter /Parchuti. This is my Twitter. I wrote a tweet some times ago. I don't want to annoy you with my stuff, which is this one. I think this is a very interesting conversation to you. And this can be a discussion. So actually, let's move discussion before our question and answer, because those two will be like one will follow the other. So I want to hear from you while we talk. To you, progressive enhancement is making sure the app works for who disabled JavaScript or before JavaScript loads. Now, this is a very interesting question. Personally, I think that if you can make your app work whenever, like even when JavaScript is literally disabled, obviously it's better because more users can have access to it. At the same time, I think that the amount of people that actively disable JavaScript is very, very low. I also spoke with Adam Argyle, which is one of the guy from Google, um, and it has some insight. And very often, like, the percentage of people that are actually actively disabling JavaScript, this means that you literally have to go to your browser settings and shut up JavaScript for every website, uh, are very few. So we are talking, I think, about percent of a percent, like 0.01% of all your users will have literally JavaScript disabled. And more often than not, those are also power users. Like, those are people that does understand what it means to navigate without JavaScript. They will, like, it's not your grandma that go in the settings and disable JavaScript. Maybe it does, because it can happen, but they will probably call you and tell you that Google is broke, and you will go there and fix it for them. So it's not a problem for those kind of people. Um, and again, so I think the real, like, what do you really want for progressive enhancement is make sure that your app work before JavaScript load. And this is because, obviously, like, our application can be quite big, and this means that, like, if you have slow 3G, for example, like if you are under the metro, uh, it can really take some time, like 10-20 seconds to download your whole application. And this, obviously, like, can be a very bad experience if for 10-20 seconds your app doesn't work. And so that's why you should probably aim to, like, at least have everything working before JavaScript loads, with the expectation that probably sometimes in the future JavaScript will load. The reason why I'm asking this, and this leads directly to our next part of the stream, which is question and answer, is because, again, in the meantime, if you want to intervene, there is a link inside the description on YouTube, or just comment on YouTube and I will read your question. Um, the reason why I ask this is because of something that I'm going to show you right now. Because very often, like, especially if you're working with a designer, there are something that, like, designers obviously want to offer the best the best experience to the users. And this also means that sometimes, like, force everyone to navigate to another page to get an information is not a very good user experience. Um, so yeah, they will probably use drawers, they will probably use dialogues and stuff like that. And again, the problem is that currently there's literally no way for a dialogue to be used without JavaScript. There is something which is the invokers API. It's a proposal that they are trying to get shipped to the browser, and I should probably zoom in a bit. They are trying to ship to the browser. So just like the popover API that we were talking before, you can have an invoke target, which is my dialog, and then you can have a dialog with the ID of my dialog, and basically clicking these, open the dialog. Very, very cool stuff, right? You can do this inside the HTML. You don't need to care about this. But this is just a proposal. It will probably pass soonish. Like, I hope that this can pass this year, and I'm very much looking at this. But for the moment, you don't have a way to do this. Like, you need JavaScript to open a dialog, or do you? What I was showing you is this. Like, okay, this is a very, and I'm probably spoiling a bit, so let's move this here. Um, there are some TypeScript error. I think I can refresh the page to make them going away. So I have this dialog component. Okay, it's still complaining for some reason. I don't care. I have this dialog component, and this dialog component, like, I want to show you that this is disabling client-side routing. This means that when you put these in SvelteKit, this route will have no JavaScript. Like, SvelteKit will not ship JavaScript to this page. So this is this dialog, and again, this should not work, right? Because we don't have JavaScript. But wait. So you can open the dialog, you can close the dialog, and to showcase that, like, there's no JavaScript, I also added these class hydrated, and the background color is based on the browser. So this is the browser will be true only when JavaScript kicks in, basically. So if JavaScript kicks in, the browser will be like this, will be green. Otherwise, it will be tomato, which is this very cool color. But also, we have this button on click here with the count. It's very simple count, but it doesn't work because there's no JavaScript. And yet, I can use this dialog. What's this magic? I actually got access to the Invokers API before, because this is also accessible, right? So I can focus on this, and like the focus is trapped inside. Obviously, like there's also the Svelte lab around it, but inside this document, the focus is trapped inside this dialog. And how is this possible? Well, this is using the dialog API, the dialog element, which again has all those niceties. Like, you can dismiss with ESC, it traps the focus inside. Very cool. So it has this button with trigger ID. The dialog has the ID. Here is the title. You can use it. There is a form with method dialog with a button to close it. And this is also another interesting stuff. I also spoiled a bit the resolution. This is also something very interesting, like dialog. If you have a form inside a dialog with a method dialog, what you can do is basically you can submit a form inside a dialog, and you can get the result of that form from where you opened the dialog with JavaScript. Very cool. In this case, I'm kind of abusing this to close the dialog, because this will also close the dialog. So you can click on the button and it will actually close the dialog. This is just an SVG from Hero Icon. And that's the tricky part. Are you ready? This will be controversial. Basically, what I'm doing is I'm actually inlining a bit of JavaScript. The very nice part about this is that this does not have to wait for the bundle to load, right? So this is immediately available because it's literally rendered next to the dialog. So this is executed and the button is selected with just normal plain old JavaScript, and a click listener is added to the button to select the model and to do show model. And by the way, this is how you can open a dialog currently, like with JavaScript today. You can do show model on a dialog to actually open the model. There is also, like, if I do this, I want to show you, there is an open attribute on the dialog. And if I try to refresh, you can see this open, like this is the dialog. But and this is kind of, I don't know why they choose to do this, because if you have the open dialog, the open attribute on a dialog, it's not actually a model, it's not actually a dialog. So the focus is not trapped. It's always open, you cannot close it. It's just basically like this open attribute just say, okay, is not put on top of everything, as you can see. like this open attribute is just there to say, okay, uh, this is a normal div basically. So I don't know why they choose to do this, while this could have been very cool because I could server-side render an open dialog, and then when JavaScript kicks in, actually change it. I don't know why they choose to do this, but I mean, it's fine. So I remove this open, and we can go back to what I was showing you. So this little bit of JavaScript kicks in as soon as it's executed. So as soon as the browser receives these, we'll actually execute this. We'll add a listener to this button that will actually open the dialog, even if hydration has not happened yet. Because when you do these, like when you do client-side routing false, it's just the JavaScript from SvelteKit that it will not be shipped. And I want to show, like, if I do true and I refresh the page, now JavaScript kicks in, and as you can see, there's this green, and I can use the counter. Very cool. But the JavaScript continue working, like the dialog continues working just fine. So I think this is a very cool pattern, and this can really lead to a better progressive enhancement because, again, with these, you have to know your audience, because if your audience is like, if you are building I love disabling javascript.com, you cannot use this because 100% of your users will disable JavaScript. But if you have a normal audience, you can probably use this quite fine and have them have a dialogue even without before hydration, which I think is very important. One small note, I was also experiment with this. You have to just make sure that, like, if you try to put this inside a form, there will be some trickery. Like, for example, this button, it should probably have a type of button here. Otherwise, it will submit the form if you are rendering it inside a form. But also, nested form are really problematic. So if you render these inside a form, this form will not actually work. I will show you, like, if I just do form inside here, and I wrap my dialog with it. If I open this, I cannot. Oh, I cannot. I can close it. Maybe because it does not have an action or method post. Maybe. Let me see, because I remember experimenting with this and it does work. I don't know. I have to check because if it works, it's cool. I remember having a problem with this. So there are definitely something to be aware before using this. And also, like, you need to be aware of the fact that you are willingly leaving behind all that disabled JavaScript. But again, they are probably having a really bad time on the internet if they are disabled JavaScript. Also because I want to see. I try to go to Google. Let's try. And let's try to disable JavaScript. Will it work? Refresh. I want to translate. Search something. Yeah. I mean, probably have to search with Google. Okay. Google works without JavaScript. Very fun. But there are some other, like, for example, there was a very good post from Jake Archibald that praised Airbnb for their like progressive enhancement story. But unfortunately, this is Airbnb today without JavaScript. You literally cannot use Airbnb without JavaScript. And again, this probably means that, like, if you have very slow internet connection, this will probably work very fast. But if you actively disable JavaScript, you are gonna have a bad time on the internet. So this was it. I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed this week in Svelte, and I can see you the next week. Thank you very much for coming. And if I will be able, I will thank you like this. See you next week.